Hello and welcome to the final video in our Getting Started with Traktor series. I'm Phil from Digital DJ Tips, and your tutor Steve today is going to tell you all about how to use EQs, filters, effects and loops to put a real shine on your mixes.
Thanks Phil. In this final video you're going to learn how to take a step up from the beat mix you learned in the last video by using some of Traktor's built-in tools to make your mixes smoother and more interesting. So we're going to cover EQ, effects, filters and loops. There's a lot to cover, so let's get cracking with the most commonly used feature, and that's EQ. Now EQ, or equalization, uses these high, mid and low knobs that you can see in the mixer to either boost, which means make louder, or to cut, which means make quieter or cut out altogether, different frequencies of your tracks. So the high frequencies are all the hissy and crashy sounds you hear in music, called the top end, stuff like hi-hats and cymbals. And the mid frequencies are things like vocals or synth sounds, melodies, and that's called the mid-range. And the low, or the bottom end of the frequency range, well, this is all the good stuff, the bass, the booming, thumpy sounds like kick drums and bass lines. Each one of these knobs is like a volume control for each frequency range, and so if you turn them all down, effectively you're turning down the volume of the entire track. But this helps us to identify what these frequencies sound like individually. So we're going to have a listen to that, but if you're watching or listening on a laptop, you may want to put some headphones on. This will help you to hear these frequencies better. Okay, so I'm going to play this track here, right in the middle where there's plenty going on. Hit play. I've got my volume fader full up, crossfader in the middle, so I should be hearing it, but I'm hearing nothing because all these are down. So let's have a listen to just the high frequencies. Okay, so you can hear there that we're hearing all of the hissy stuff, like I said, all of the cymbals and the top end. Let's have a listen to the mid-range. Okay, and now I'm going to just jump back a little bit, and now we're going to listen to the bottom end. And if you're wondering how I'm switching these knobs up to full volume so quickly, I'm doing that by double clicking, which is something that you can't actually do on DJ controllers, but you can do on pretty much every knob on Traktor's interface. Just by double clicking it, it sets it back to its center point. Let's listen to the bass. Okay, so now you know what EQ does, I'm going to show you the single most used classic use of EQ in mixing, and it's called the bass swap. And this is used to prevent things like bass lines and kick drums competing with each other when both tracks are live in the mix. The bass swap is where you start to mix your tracks together, but the incoming track has the bass, or the low, down until you reach the perfect point where you want to swap the focus from the first track to the second one, and you simultaneously swap the bass on the tracks at that magic moment. Now, if you have a DJ controller, you can do this by using both hands and turning one up and one down at the same time. But you have to adopt a slightly different method with the trackpad or the mouse, because you can't do those two things at the same time. So I'm going to teach you a simple and effective keyboard method. So let's do exactly the same mix we did in the last video. The same two tracks with the cue point set to help us with the mix point. And this time we're going to start with the bass down on the incoming track. So I'm going to start the incoming track with the crossfader in the middle, but the volume fader down. And I'm going to start counting the bars, and I'm going to slowly bring up the volume of the incoming track over about 7 bars. And then at the very last bar, just before I want the swap to happen, I'm going to take the bass out of the first track, and then I'm going to drop the bass in on the next track by double clicking the knob, as I've already shown you. It's actually much easier to show you than to describe, so let's have a look. There you go. So it was smoother, the kick drums were not competing with each other, and the focus swapped nicely over to the new track. And the fact that we had to bring the bass down that bit before putting it up on deck B, it actually gave us a nice kind of tension build to the drop-in point, almost like a mini breakdown. So now we're going to try the exact same technique, but with something more adventurous. I want to mix my second track right in the middle, where there's loads going on. Let's have a listen. I've got a cue point set already. So as you can hear, there's a lot going on there, bass lines and synths, etc. And I'm going to use exactly the same technique and timing to hopefully get us smoothly between these two tracks, but dropping right into the meat or the middle of the track rather than at the beginning. So let's give it a go. Reset everything. So that's the bass swap, and if you master just that one single EQ trick in your mixing, you'll be just fine. But for now I'm going to show you how you can use a filter to do kind of the same thing, but with one single knob, and it actually gives a much cooler sound. Let's have a look at and a listen to the filter. Okay, so here's where the filter control is, and what the filter is doing is filtering out certain frequencies as you move it in a much more melodic way than the EQ does. It creates a really cool kind of sweeping, whooshy sound. So if you move it to the left, it filters out all the high frequencies, the top end, and it moves towards having just the low or the bass frequencies left. And this is called the low pass filter, letting the low frequencies pass through. And when you move it the other way, yep, you guessed it, it filters out the low stuff and leaves us with the top end, the high stuff. This is the high pass filter. So let's have a listen. Make sure the little blue light here is on, otherwise the filter will not be engaged. And let's have a listen with this track from my cue point right in the middle of the track again. So this is the low pass filter. Now you've got to have really good speakers to be listening to what's left there, just the very, very sub-low bass. I can double click it to get it back to the middle. And now the high pass filter. That's probably the more familiar filter sound that you might hear DJs using a lot in their mixes. And again, double click it to get it back to the middle. So let's use filter in a mix. I'm going to redo the last mix that we did with the more adventurous one here. And this time I'm going to start with the volume faders up, but with the high pass filter on the incoming track to 100%. And the reason why I can have the fader up is because if the filter's engaged, it means it's very quiet and you won't hear it. So I'm going to start the mix at exactly the same time, but gradually as we approach the end of the first track, I'm going to sweep the filter up so we hear more and more of the full frequency, eventually getting to the center point after 8 bars or when my first track comes to an end. Right, let's give it a go. Put the filter up to 100% here. Get ready on this deck. I can leave the volume faders up here. I'm going to get my cue point ready there. And let's go. So it's playing, but you can't really hear it yet. You can start to hear it sweeping in now. There you go, and it's now at 0% with the full frequency playing. So that sounds pretty cool. And quickly I'm going to show you how people use filters in tracks while they're playing to create kind of mini breakdowns. Here you can use the trackpad or the mouse to gradually move the knob up and cut the bass, then right at the perfect moment, double click it to drop everything back in. Let's give it a go on this track here. Let's do a faster one. Let's try the other way. Okay, cool. So now you've got some EQ and filter tricks up your sleeve. What about using Traktor's built-in effects to add a bit of spice? Well, let's move on to that. So this box up here is an effects bank, and these buttons that you see here on each side of the mixer select whether the corresponding deck is being affected by that effect. And I'm going to show you how cool it is to trigger an effect on your outgoing deck just as the track is coming to an end. But first of all, let's set up the effect itself. As you can see in the drop down here, there are lots of effects to choose from, but some of the best ones are quite simple, things like delay and reverb and flanger. And in time, experiment with as many of these as you like, but for this technique, I want you to use delay T3, just here. I use this effect and this trick a lot in my DJing. It's well practiced and well used, and other people do as well, so hopefully you'll like this one. Okay, with T3 selected, let's first set the dry-wet balance here, which is this knob here. And this means how much of the effect, which is the wet, and how much of the original track, which is the dry, are being blended together. The lower you have this, the less you're going to hear the effect. But for this, let's have it set to 50% at the 12 o'clock position. Next, we're going to switch the effect on by clicking this button here. And then we're going to set this knob here to 1/8 of a beat. You'll see it click between percentages and then fractions of a beat, 1/8 of a beat. And this is the rate that the delay will be heard. It's like the timing, if you like. Please experiment with this timing once you've nailed this technique, but for this one, have it at 1/8. Okay, so let's have a listen to what it does to the track on its own. And we do that by clicking the 1 button here to engage the effect of bank number 1 on track number 1. And if we clicked the number 2 button, we would engage this effects bank up here if we had something in it. But for this one, we just need number 1. So let's have a listen. Okay, so can you hear how we're hearing that echoey delayed effect laid over the top of the track? There's actually quite a lot going on there at the moment, but have a listen to what happens when I stop the deck. Yeah, that's cool, and that's the effect that we're going to use to sign off our mix by engaging the effect just a short while before the outgoing track comes to an end. So we're going to do our straight intro and outro mix. I'm going to count to 7 bars before I switch on the effect, and then I'm going to stop the track by hitting the play button and leave the effect to fade out like you just heard. The first thing I'm going to do is switch off the effect. Now let's have a listen. Pretty sweet. So you should now start to combine your EQ, filters and effects to really start to ramp up the coolness. But there's one more feature of Traktor I want you to try, and that is looping. Now, you may have been wondering what these numbers are just underneath the decks. Well, these are the loop settings. And when you click one, Traktor will start looping the track by the number of beats that you've selected. And you can change the length of the loop by clicking a different number. And this can be used to create one of the most famous rhythmic effects in DJing and dance music in general. I'm going to show it to you now. It takes some well-timed clicks, but you can learn this really easily. Now make sure that you have snap switched on for this so that the loop will start on a beat even if you don't click quite at the right time. Okay, so let's put a loop here just after cue point number 3. I'm going to switch off the effects, hit play and set our loop from that cue point. Okay, now have a listen to what happens as I halve the length of the loop. Nice, I love doing that. I'm sure you recognise that effect. But how can loops help you in mixing tracks together? Well, the cleverest way is to create a never-ending mix-out section for you to mix over. And that means that you can take as much time as you want with filters and effects to bring your next track in without your current track, your first track, running out. So let me show you. At the end of our decade track, we actually only have around 30 seconds to get the next track in. And on some music, you might only have 1 or 2 bars of clean space before the track ends. So what we're going to do is we're going to engage a loop at the point where the cleanest part of the track starts, so that I can take as long as I want to bring my next track in. Okay, here goes. Okay, wait for it. So now I've got my loop running. That's going to carry on for as long as I need. I'm going to put my filter up again. Start my mix. And also now, because my loop is running indefinitely, I can start to use the filter to filter the loop out. Cool, and a point to note is that if you hit any empty cue slot whilst a track is playing, that loop will be saved for you to use anytime you load that track. So there you go. We've covered a huge amount in this video, and it's only the tip of the creative iceberg with what you might want to do with Traktor. I hope this series has helped you get off and running with the software, and I encourage you to start to implement these techniques with your own tunes, and I guarantee you'll get the DJing bug if you didn't have it already. I'm Steve Canuetto for Digital DJ Tips, and I'll see you soon.